G'day, welcome back to this quarantine special. It's I reckon that most of the people that watch this channel are probably in the sheds and thanking gods that they have some time to spend on their cars. So I suppose take advantage of it. As bad as the situation is, how often do you get to be locked away in your shed for a couple of weeks to work on your pride and joy? So anyway, this brings me to what's entailed in this episode, and it's come time to finally get back to the chassis, revisit what's in store for rejuvenating that chassis and getting it back to a state that I'm willing to put back on the body back on. So without further ado, let's go over there and have a look, and I'll see you in there. All right, so before I get into the details of the chassis and what I propose to do to restore it, I was going to do some body filler in this episode, but unfortunately the 3M container that I bought of body filler was missing the hardness, so I was devoed. So being Easter weekend, can't just duck down the street, especially where I am, and get some hardness. So unfortunately that's flawed my episode prospects for this time, but so really, that'll push me towards the chassis. I was 50-50 anyway, so so basically I'm just going to go over it now and see what needs to be done, and then we'll start breaking down how I'm going to go about it. All right, so here we are. I did go over this briefly after I removed the body from the chassis and had a look at what needs to be done, but I'll go over it again. So in overall it's in pretty good nick. I did give it a gurney, as you know, but it needs to be degreased, and then I'll probably run that burnishing tool over it with that wire wheel just to get any surface rust on it. But honestly, it's not too bad. I was talking to a mate, Neil. He's one of the local old mechanics around the area, and he was suggesting that the front end's pretty good. He wouldn't take it apart, but I think, well, come this far, I want to take it apart so I can clean it all. And you can see that the bushes and stuff have been replaced at some time. They're not too bad. Well, in saying that, that's not bad, but that's not too good. So even though it's going to be more work, I'm going to take it all apart, give it a clean, paint what I can. Someone did mention to just take the whole thing down to the sandblasters and they can do a satin on it. But to be honest, I think it's just another thing I have to haul around. So I'll do it all here, and it's all part of the process. I want to do this whole thing pretty much myself. And I do, as I mentioned, I did have something that's new to treat the internals of these rails, which I will get to, but not right now. And it's quite a unique product, so I'm excited to have a look at that. Things that need to be done, basically 10 bolt Salisbury, that's a 3.75 ratio. I don't want to keep that because this used to rev quite high on the highway, so I want to get a 308. I don't know if I can change the ratio internals inside this housing, or whether it's just better off just buying a completely refurbished 308. I don't want to just buy anyone off Gumtree because it's probably, chances are, been flogged at some stage. It would be good to get an LSD one. I don't know if that exists, but if someone knows, drop a comment on. It's really just going down to how I tackle this, Leaf springs on the back, to me, look easier to start with, and removing these shockers and removing the diff and the U-bolts and all that kind of stuff, take the wheels off, we'll leave them on the diff itself, and then I've got the rears are sort of suspended. Once I get that done and the front off, then I can sort of tip the whole chassis rail on its side and start to clean it up. I'm going to leave all the brake lines on there. I don't particularly, they're in good nick, and I don't really want to make too much work for myself, so I'm going to leave all them in situ and clean them up, and I'll just paint with the rust shield, the rust seal KBS over the top of that. There's a couple of modifications. Obviously you saw that fence picket. It's been welded on. That's obviously not factory, so that'll need to come off. That's obviously been done at some stage for some kind of bracket air conditioning or something mounted on there. I think this is not factory either. I think that's been welded on for the turbo 350 gearbox. So anyway, yeah, I'm going to attempt to make some washers out of there, where I've got some steel lying around, or I'll just go and get some new stuff. But I'll do that towards the end. I'm just concentrating on going to disassemble at this stage, and how I'm going to go about that. So yeah, it's a bit of work in it. There's a master cylinder there, brake master cylinder, which was just dangling. So that'll have to be disassembled as well. And you've got the power steering unit there as well, so that'll need to come off, as with all this stuff as well. You can see here, I mean, that's, it's probably all right, but I think at some stage I did get some of these replaced. That's definitely been replaced, but these, I'm not too sure. Anyway, it's not in horrible nick, but I'd just like to go in there and clean it all up. So that is what I'm going to do. Anyway, so what I'll do is I'll just set up a little bit of a time lapse, and we'll start by disassembling this rear section and get the diff out, and go from there. So I've disassembled the rear suspension and the diff from the chassis, and I've sort of laid it out roughly. I haven't got the room to take the diff out at the moment, but leaf springs are out. I'll just flip it around, hang on. Yeah, so I got leaf springs. Shocks were absolutely stuffed. This was the mount for the U-bolts holding on the diff. I cut through the U-bolts because they were just completely really rusted on. Couldn't budge. So considering I'm going to replace and put, I think, about an inch lowering block. So I'm keen to get everyone's feedback here, but basically I want to try and keep it legal, but at the same time, have it sitting nice. So I'm a little bit up in the air as to what the options are there. I was going to get them reset, the leaf springs reset 4 inches lower. Straight away, I don't know if that's going to be legal. I've heard that legal is, 100 mil from the bottom of the body to the road, but then there's also, someone's told me that there's a legal requirement for suspension between top of the diff and the bump stop. So if anyone knows, write down in the comments, because I'd be keen to, and I'll give a link for everyone to send their setups and spec out exactly what you've got, including wheels to fit under the guards. Because I want to run 17s on this, and I've got some offsets up written up from previous examples for a 9-inch size, 9-inch width at the back. I can't remember off the top of my head, and 8.5 at the front, or maybe it was 8.5 at the back, 7.5 at the front. I'm not too sure, but yeah, be keen to see everyone's setup. So reset the leaf spring 4 inches lower. Although I'm not too sure if that's going to be just as expensive as buying some King super low leaf springs, brand new, and then getting a lowering block as well to just give it an extra inch. So I think the Kings give a 3-inch plus lowering blocks 4-inch. I don't think you'd want to be going lower than that, to be honest. Yeah, I'm not 18 anymore. So yeah, and as you can see, stuffed. It doesn't even come back up. So there's absolutely no compression in those whatsoever. Little tip that I learned the hard way when you're getting these out, you can see there's some corrosion. These are the leaf spring, these hold the leaf springs into the back, and getting them out is a little bit of a bitch, so don't hammer, whatever you do. Don't hammer on these bolt ends to try and get it out. Lever with a crowbar or a pin bar. Yeah, just lever off the chassis and that will come out from inside the rubber grommets, which you can see there. That rubber grommet's not too bad. So Neil, I mentioned before, is the local Yoda of mechanics in the area that I come from. I came over and he looked at this chassis. He's done many WB, HQ or H series chassis in his career as a mechanic. And he said this steel here, he goes, although it's eaten away, he goes, once you stop that rust, yeah, it's going to take a long time to eat off again. This eat away, he goes, you'll be long gone off this earth by the time that ever rusts through. He goes, he'd just treat it with the rust and be done with it. I was basing it off the thickness of this cross member here, which is actually twice as thick as this section here. So you can see it's thinner. So although it is quite sharp on these edges, it's actually not too bad. There's still heaps of strength on there. These are actually thinner than you think, these chassis, and they're actually quite light. Like I can lift that, no dramas at all from the back. And if I wanted to, I could just wheel it out and using the front. So yeah, so that's going to make my life easier. As mentioned, I was going to do all that welding and stuff, but and you know what, you probably could, but I heard it from a guy with 20 years experience, and he reckons it's going to be all right, and it's going to be all right. And that's it. He's got to move on. Sometimes you can just waste time with stuff. So now that the back end's done, suspension, I've got attached to the brake lines. These are the pins from the front of the leaf springs. You've got these pins here which hold on the front, the brake lines coming off here. You see it actually comes through there, so when you come there you just pull that off and that will actually just come back out. The same on the other side. Yeah, so anyway, that's it. It was easier than I thought. This diff is a 375 ratio. I want a 308, so if anyone's got a 308 that they want to swap or they want to sell me, it's in good condition, has to be refurbished. I don't want something that's flogged out. Then yeah, please hit me up on the comments, because the sooner I get one the better. Also, these wheels are going to be for sale, so if anyone wants some original dragways, unfortunately I'm missing the centre caps, but they are original dragways. And I'm not sure of the offsets, but I can find that information out, because I'm going to need to get rid of them in order to get the new ones. So now, yeah, that's done. I'm going to move on to the front end disassembly. So Neil once again gave me a bit of a breakdown because I don't have any idea. So I'm going to start off with just doing a bit of an assessment on what I can save and what I can't. Before I brought this in, all these seals and these caster, well, I'm confused about all this assembly basically. But from what I know, upper control arm, lower control arm, not too sure. Caster busher down here, maybe that's the spindle, ball joint. So all these essentially have been replaced at some time, and going over with Neil, he said that he wouldn't replace them. So what you can do is you can unbolt here, unbolt there where the power steering is, and this whole steering rack can come out as one unit. Take the wheel off obviously, and you can sort of get a majority of this front section out before you get to the spring. So the spring being a V8, they used to be a bastard apparently to get out. So you need some V8 springs, spring compressors to get that down before you can even attempt to try and undo the upper and lower control arms. And then once that's done, I'll have to get a couple of those spring compressors. Once they're done, then I can pretty much disassemble the whole thing and get the chassis rails by themselves. So it seems like a lot of work. It's actually not when you start breaking it down. And as long as you keep categorising everything as per usual in your boxes and stuff, then when it comes to reassembly, it won't be too bad. So basically, what the go is here, I don't have any cracked chassis mounts or anything. This was a city ute, so there's no mud or debris inside the rails, which is great. I know that some of the farm utes used to just get completely chock-a-block with mud, and that's why they used to rust out. And I know that the same chassis for the 6 and the 8, and so the cracks used to occur around here, apparently, around these areas here. So you can see that's fine, and which is great. And with a wire wheel, now that I've gurneyed it, just need a wire wheel. You go over it, get rid of most of the stuff. Once this is all disassembled, degrease everything, probably bring the chassis inside the booth and put it on its side and give it a spray coat, bring it back, reassemble the front end. I need to get some drop spindles, which will give it a 50mm drop, and I'll assess whether we're going to reuse those springs. So there's a little bit of money to drop on this chassis to get it fully back to normal, but the sooner the better. And then I can get moving on to the donk. So I'll start by, disassembling the front end, and we'll go from there. Okay, so before I start dismantling the front end, I just wanted to go over a few things of the rear suspension on these utes, on the H-series utes, particularly the WB. You would have heard that there's radial tuned suspension which came in, I think, the late HZ model, or the later HZs, well, certainly the HZ model, and then obviously onto the WB. The radial tuned suspension was the premium style suspension because it gave a nicer quality ride and handled better. That is attributed to the front, I think. No, not the rear leaf springs. So correct me if I'm wrong. But the options for the leaf springs, there's a few aftermarket options out there at the moment of varying budgets. So it depends on what you want to achieve, what you're going to use the ute for, and how much you want to spend, really. So I just thought I'd run over the 3 options that I've seen out in the market that will do lowering the ute and also make the ute handle better in the rear end. And I'll go through those now. So number 1, I'll start at the top and I'll work my way down to the third option, which will be the cheapest and the most common option. So number 1 for me is that you can, from what I've seen, is you can get a full 4-link suspension setup on the rear, which will be, can attach to a 9-inch diff or a normal Salisbury diff, depends on what you want to run. If you're running that kind of 4-link suspension, you can get coilovers fitted, and the sky's the limit with the setup in there. Generally, you won't be running a Salisbury, you'll be running a higher horsepower diff, because that kind of setup will be purely for burnouts, and drags. So you'd be wanting to run a 9-inch, forward 9-inch or something like that. So it'd be that's a high-end, high-dollar build, and that's not for me in this build. I just want to, obviously on a tight budget, and I'm not going to be using this car for burnouts and things like that. So that's number 1 out for me. Number 2, which is a really cool, unique product by Motorfab, and it's an Australian-made product. And what it is, it's a bolt-on leaf spring kit. So essentially, it uses a leaf spring, but it bolts onto the same existing shackle points. I think you do have to drill a few holes on the rear shackle point, to make it fit, but essentially it's bolt-on product, really cool, innovative product, and it can handle high horsepower as well. Retails for around about $1,900, and once again, that's pretty high dollar for a car you're just going to be cruising around on a Sunday or Saturday and not going to the drag strip or doing burnouts. So as much as I'd love to get that, and also gives you adjustable heights, so you can have low standard, which is 2 to 3, low 3 to 4 inch, or super low 4 to 5 inch drop, which is great because you can adjust it in the leaf springs and not have to flap around with getting them reset and things like that. So awesome product. Wish I could justify spending the money on it, but I can't. And the last option, I mean there is a few options, but I'm choosing 3 that I sort of stand out to me. The last option, which is the most common option, is to get the standard springs and bring them to a spring place and get them reset to a 3-inch drop or a 2-inch drop, and that will give you a nice lowering of the rear end of the ute, and then you can top it up with a 1-inch lowering block as well. So everyone says shies away from lowering blocks. Lowering blocks are bad if you, this is my understanding of it. Once again, correct me if I'm wrong. But lowering blocks are bad if you start going 2 inches and above. So your 3-inch lowering block, the whole centre of gravity and your ride harshness is going to be affected because the springs aren't designed for that, and also your centre of gravity's also altered. So the best idea would be to reset your springs at 2 inches and then get a 1-inch lowering block, which will give you a drop of 3 inches. I don't know the legalities of that still. I'm up in the air with whether that's legal. Once again, 100mm clearance from the bottom of the ute to the road, but there's also some roadworthy regulations on the bump stop distance as well. So it'd be great to hear some thoughts on people's suspension setups on the rear, and that will definitely influence my final decision. But right now, there is the fourth one actually, which is the complete bag kit air riding by Air Rider, or Air Ride, which they do a bolt-in kit for WB H series, and it retails at about $2.5 grand. But then there's all the other odds and ends that need to go with it. You have to, modify the chassis if you really want to drop right on its guts, and then you've got to get engineer's certificate and things like that. So that's sort of a big dollar thing as well. So leave that alone and just keep it simple for now. Keep it low dollar, and then I can pump that money into the engine and move this thing along. I'm thinking of utilising the original leaf spring and to take it to Petters, or if anyone knows anywhere in Bendigo that will reset these leaf springs. I'm going to ask for a recommendation, but my recommendation would be 2 to 3 inch reset, and then I'll factor in the extra inch with the lowering block at a later stage, depending on the roadworthy implications and things like that. And I'll probably get them to, if they don't recondition them, then I will give them a coat of paint when I come back after their reset. Fucking heavy, by the way. Shockers. These ones are literally shockers. They're just dead in the water. So there's not too much to be said about these. You can just get some good medium price shockers to bolt back on once you've done the leaf springs. So diff's not going to change. I'm going to keep the Salisbury, but I'm going to change it to a 3:8 ratio. Once again, it'd be nice to have a 9-inch option, but big money and not worth it for this build. Maybe build down the track. So anyway, that's the suspension setup options that I've been looking at. There is more out there, but they're the 3 that really stood out. Anyway, let's get back onto the front end and start dismantling it. Okay, so stage 1, I'm going to call it stage 1 for disassembly of the front end has been done. I can't go any further because I need V8 compressing springs, which I don't have. So I'm going to turn this into a series for the chassis. So this is part 1. So we've done the rear disassembly, we've done half the front, and now I'll get the V8 springs. We will clamp these springs down and then get the access to the ball joints the upper and lower control arms, remove that spring, get the spindle out and the rotor and things like that, and lay it all out. So, you know, it was a little bit of work. You've certainly got to keep in mind where everything's going for reassembly once it's all painted and cleaned and things like that. But quickly, I'll show you now what I've taken out so far, and I'm going to leave assembled and then recondition it, clean it, paint it, and then that's done as far as I'm concerned. So I'll show you now. All right, so this is the parts that I've taken out so far. So I'm a little bit rusty with my labelling of parts, but I'm just going to roll with the fact that I've taken it out. So there, the calipers, the brakes. There's the power steering unit. It has been reconditioned earlier on when I first bought the ute, and so that'll be good to go. So as you can see, I mean, I could potentially replace those bushes there. They are a little bit crimped and things like that, but it's certainly not throwaway. These are full of caked mud and things like that, but the actual condition of these isn't too bad either. So with the cleanup, I imagine they're going to be pretty good. There's not much play and things like that. So it's just, this ute was dropping a lot of oil, as you remember, from the engine, so that's why everything's covered in shit. So anyway, that is a reasonably easy part to clean up and repaint. Calipers will have to be done, sandblast and things like that. I'm going to potentially buy a little sandblasting unit so I can do all these little parts. I'll clean them up and see how it goes. And then obviously that step power steering unit can be cleaned up. These control arms and things like that can be cleaned up and repainted and then reassembled. So I don't want to make life any harder than it needs to be. So I'm happy with just cleaning that up and painting it as is. Springs are probably half decent. I'll have a look at them once they're out, but I probably will just paint them and reuse them again. The spindles, I think I will get a 50mm drop spindle from the rod shop. I'm pretty sure they're the only guys that are making them now. Because I think that, you know, you go this far, it really does look nice to have that 50mm drop at the front without compromising your spring height quality, your ride quality, without compressing them too much. So you can still have your standard springs or your lowered springs, but have that lower height and still have a compliant ride. We'll get more into the internals when I show you the product for doing the internal coating, but for now it's more about just the disassembly and getting the front end done. So I'll have to get those V8 clamps, and so that I can get access to all this, and then once all that's off, then we can carry this the chassis rails out onto a trailer and then give it a real clean. Probably take this cross member off, give that a clean itself, degrease it all, start wire reeling, and really get it painted and reassembled as quickly as possible. So it just comes down to getting the spindles, obviously replacing the diff gearing with the 308, and getting the leaf springs compressed. But all the painting and stuff can go ahead before that. So. All right, so that's it for part one of the restoration of the WB chassis. Part two will be coming in the next few days once I get the next tools, the V8 springs and things like that. And then we'll get stuck into it, disassemble it and see what we've got, and then start degreasing and prepping everything for paint. So yeah, thanks for watching. If you haven't subscribed, click the subscribe button, join the journey from episode 1 to now, and I'll see you next time. See ya.